I'd like to call this council and committee meeting to order. We begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Mississaugas of the New Credit, and the Anishinaabe people, many of whom still occupy this area. Madam Clerk, the roll call.
Your Worship, all members of council are present this evening.
Thank you. Just a few brief announcements, and I want to start with the events of October 31st, November the 1st, the gigantic storm that we had. And I want to, in particular, thank the members of the Town of Fort Erie staff, the Fort Erie Fire Department and the volunteer firefighters, the people who work for Canadian Niagara Power and the Niagara Parks Commission, and the contractors that were called in by various agencies, including the town, MPC, CNP, to assist with respect to the cleanup. Also want to commend the residents, many of whom took it upon themselves to try to make sure that their neighbors were safe, particularly elderly people, and who also started the cleanup to the extent that they could in safety. I'm pleased to say that although there were 7,000 customers of Canadian Niagara Power that were without power in both Fort Erie and Port Colborne, my understanding is they've all been returned to service now. There may be a pocket or two, but I'm understanding it's all back to normal. All of the roads have been cleared, and so things are back to normal in terms of being able to move around the town and being able to utilize your electricity, but there's a lot of work still to be done. I understand there were over 20 hydro poles that were snapped. There were a number of lines that were damaged. There's a lot of internal damage to residents. People are now finding out that maybe their gas line was disrupted by a tree that fell over, that type of thing. I want to congratulate and thank all of them on behalf of council. I do want to point out that the area where there was a lot of most of the damage was along the lake and the entrance to the river, in particularly Waverly Beach. It's a very graphic example of the damage that Mother Nature can impose upon us when inclined to do so, both the wind and the water. And the one thing I would say, and I know that some of the councillors have received expressions of concern, is that part of the walkway between the end of Lakeshore Road, just to the west of Bardal, and heading west, is completely damaged. It's destroyed. Concrete slabs have been overturned. It's not safe for people to be wandering around. And so I would urge people, as much as they're concerned about the area and want to see what happened, to stay away. It's not safe. The town staff will be assessing the damage and moving forward. And a little later on this evening, I'll be asking staff to give council and the public information as to next steps. Second thing I wanted to mention is that coming up on Friday is the Chamber of Commerce Black Cat Gala, which is being held at the Cherry Hill Golf Course. And for those who are interested in going, tickets can be obtained from the Greater Fort Erie Chamber of Commerce. The following evening, Saturday, November the 9th, the annual Red Ribbon Art Exhibit held by the Fort Erie Arts Council will be conducted at the Leisureplex here in Fort Erie, and that's between 7 and 11 p.m. And finally, there are a series of Remembrance Day ceremonies coming up at the beginning of next week. There are 2 services on November the 10th, maybe 3 services. I do know that Branch 230, which is the Ridgeway branch, is holding a service in Stevensville at 2 p.m. at the Stevensville Memorial Hall. Branch 71, which is the Fort Erie branch, is holding its annual parade from the Legion, starting at 1:30 p.m. down to Mather Arch, and the service will be held there. The following day, November the 11th, the Ridgeway branch will be holding its Remembrance Day service at 11 a.m. at the Ridgeway Memorial Cemetery Cenotaph. And there may be other services. I know the high school is holding a couple of services on November the 11th, but those are the public ones being held by our Legion branch. There is no addendum this evening. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? There being none, we've got some upcoming public meetings, starting with the budget schedule. The first meeting will be this Wednesday, November the 6th, all the meetings start at 6 p.m. and are held here in the Town Hall Council chamber. The first meeting on Wednesday relates to the capital budget and forecast. The second meeting will be December the 4th. That is water and wastewater operating budget and user fees analysis. Wednesday, January 22nd, will be the general levy operating budget and assessment analysis, along with the library's budget. If there's a need, there will be a fourth meeting held on January the 29th, 2020. Otherwise, the bylaws with respect to all of those are projected for Monday, December the 9th, the preliminary capital budget, Monday, January the 20th, 2020, water and wastewater budget and rates, and Monday, February the 10th, 2020, the general levy budget and general capital budget bylaw. If necessary, there will be a meeting on March the 16th to pass any bylaws that haven't been covered. We have some public meetings coming up with respect to planning matters. The first is an official plan amendment and property rezoning with respect to property owned by the regional municipality of Niagara on Crescent Road, where the water tower used to be located. That will be Tuesday, November the 12th, 2019, here in the council chamber at 6 p.m. The information report for that, a public meeting, will be available on our website on Wednesday, November the 6th. There is also a draft plan of subdivision, official plan amendment, and property rezoning for Ashton Homes for what will be phase 2 of their Peacebridge Village subdivision. Again, that meeting will be held 6 p.m. here in the town hall, November the 12th, 2019, and the information report will be available on Wednesday, November 6th on our website. There are no public meetings this evening, which takes us to the consent agenda. I have a mover, Councillor Zanko. Are there any questions with respect to any of the reports that are contained in the consent agenda? I would point out that Mr. Chris Miller is here. He's the author of the report relative to the community improvement programs, and he is under the weather, but he is available here in case anyone has any questions. I had a long list of questions, but I'll defer them. Any other questions by any members of council of any other reports in the consent agenda? Councillor Noyes?
In regards to the, I guess it's the CIP program, in reviewing that, I will say that we have I did attend a meeting regarding someone who's taking advantage or hoping to take advantage of the community improvement plan. And reading the report, I think it must be very frustrating with the on and off again and not the uncertainty of the region's position on this. And I'm hoping that at some point, and I know that the report does allude to that, that something hopefully will be nailed down, because I think more people may be taking advantage of if they knew with some certainty what dollars were available to them. And then there's also a question about the Moby mats. Very much in support of that. We have, in our accessibility committee, we have 3 individuals that use wheelchairs, 2 Empower wheelchairs, and all 3 of them have used the Moby mats and just sing their praises. And I understand from Bev that she has looked and researched if there's anything even comparable, and there's just nothing out there that's comparable to the Moby mats, and there's only one supplier of Moby mats in Canada.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Lubberts.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Just speaking about the downtown core area improvement plans, I'm just wondering if Mr. Miller has any idea of when he might be starting the CIP for Crystal Beach area.
That will start after the secondary plan has been completed. That's a requirement. But Mr. Miller, if you want to come forward, if you've got some further information.
Good evening, Mayor Redekop. Thank you. Through you to Councillor. You're right. Our protocol has been to do them on the heels of the secondary plan. The reason being is that when you're doing the project area, selecting the project area, it's to align with the designated and zoned commercial lands. And in situations such as this, where we're looking at the land use in the community, there are going to be some changes. So putting a CIP in place over top of lands that are going to be residentially used is not of any benefit. So it is a short process, but after we have a land use plan in place that this council has adopted, then there's a comfort level of putting in place the project area to match. So that would be my comment.
Councillor Lubberts? Did you want a rough time frame?
Well, we're looking to be at a public meeting in February for the secondary plan. So from that point, I would have to say that it would be a month after.
So sometime in the spring, perhaps?
Yes, our goal would definitely be to have it available for the commercial property owners in the spring of 2020.
Thank you. Any other questions of Mr. Miller while he's up there? I want to commend you. It's an excellent report, does capture the predicament. Just to comment with respect to Councillor Noyes' concern, this is an issue that the regional staff have been struggling with in terms of trying to get it removed from their budgets. Councillors, in particular the mayors, and a number of the councillors think it should be in there. The real issue is that there needs to be a program that is clear and transparent and provides the accountability that is necessary for the residents and the level of government that's providing the support. And I've spoken to the regional chair about this and suggested that maybe Fort Erie's plan should be one that could be emulated by the region. At least then, all of the criteria would be met, and they'd realize the return on investment. If there are no other questions of Mr. Miller, thank you very much, sir. And you may leave. Yes, we don't want to demote you. Okay, if there are no other questions with respect to the consent agenda item, then I'm going to call the question on the recommendations and the reports. All those in favor? None opposed? That is carried. That then takes us to Planning and Development Services. Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. There are no presentations and delegations. That brings us to report number PDS 62, 2019, Royal Ridge Phase 1 subdivision agreement and pre-servicing approval, west side of Ridge Road North, south of Nye Road, Royal Oak Property Development Limited.
So moved.
It's now on the floor. Are there any comments or questions? Councillor Butler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to make a comment. This has been a long process for the developer, and I'm glad to see that this report is here and that we're able to move forward with it at this point. So I'll be in support of this.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of the report? The report carries. That brings us to new business inquiries. In response to inquiries inquired by Councillor Dubanow at the October 15th, 2019 Council Committee meeting regarding the local examples of truck fit and natural playgrounds. Dubanow, location of local examples of truck fit and natural playgrounds. I don't think they're naming them after you, though.
So
Just the way it's written.
that's something you can refer to Ms. Dolch.
Yes, Ms. Dolch?
Thank you. So we looked into this, and our response to this inquiry was relative to the discussion on the proposed Douglas Park and Albert Street master plans. Council requested that consultant Michael Barker of Shift Landscape Architecture provide the location of local examples of amenities proposed in the plans, specifically natural playgrounds and truck fit adult fitness equipment. Outlined below are several, and I'll explain them in a moment, several locations of these amenities. In addition, an attachment is provided that illustrates these examples and others within the Golden Horseshoe. Not all locations are open to the public, schools, daycares, etc. So if of interest to council, it is recommended visits be arranged in advance. The attachment is provided on white paper for the purpose of legibility. Local natural playgrounds: Mountain View Natural Playground and Healing Garden, Pastones, Branscombe, Mental Health Center, St. Catharines, Bethlehem Place, St. Catharines, Cherrywood Acres Elementary School, Niagara Falls, Children's Science and Natural Area, St. Catharines. Local truck fit installations are at Virgil Sports Park, Niagara-on-the-Lake, Shirkston Shores, Port Colborne.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a brief comment. I just want to extend my appreciation to staff for preparing this and particularly including the photos with it attached to the agenda here. The public can get an idea of what we're looking into for these playgrounds. I thought it was fantastic. I do appreciate the effort. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Dubanow. Any further comments or questions? Mayor Redekop?
I just wanted to ask whether we're allowing any construction in the floodplains by minor variance or other approval.
Ms. Dolch?
Through you to the mayor, construction in floodplains do at certain times occur depending on the situation. The Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authorities review that. It depends where the flood hazard actually ends up lying. Right now in our mapping, sometimes that flood hazard doesn't match what the NPCA has on it, but generally the NPCA is consulted because they're the ones who control the flooding hazards in Fort Erie.
I would just be very concerned about any approvals close to the floodplains because we're getting more and more extreme weather. This most recent storm is an example. Maybe the last time it was that severe was 1985, perhaps. But all indications are that the weather is going to be more extreme, and I'm just very concerned that people who are permitted to build close to or within a floodplain are going to be terribly disappointed when the weather continues the way it's going. So hopefully we'll keep an eye on that. Thank you.
Any further inquiries? Seeing none, Planning and Development Services is now closed, and I hand it chair
Business
back to
status
you.
report.
Oh, I'm sorry, business status report. Any comments or questions on the business status report? Seeing none, Planning and Development Services is closed once again.
Thank you. That takes us to infrastructure services. Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Infrastructure Services is now in session. We have no presentations and delegations. We have no reports. Does any members of council have any new business or inquiries? Councilor Mayor Redekop?
Yeah, there was a response to a council inquiry. It looks like it's Public Works, since Tim Marata signed it. This was in response to an inquiry by Councillor Butler, October the 21st. Do you have this?
That's next week.
Yeah, well, the dates are all wrong. Date of the response, October 30th. Does say council meeting, so I'm just forecasting it's coming next week. Did you get?
Yeah,
or 2
that'll be
weeks
in
from
the
now, did you
business
get a
status
copy?
report, I think.
Did you get a copy of this? There's the answer. I did have a couple of questions, though, if I
Okay,
could.
go ahead.
First had to do with maybe the CEO can give us an indication of what the next steps are in terms of dealing with the storm that occurred last weekend and where we might be with respect to that.
Yeah, Mr. Cookett?
Through you, Chair, to the mayor. So staff has been looking into any funding that may be out there. We did find some provincial funding. It's called the MDRA funding. It's Municipal Disaster Recovery Assistance funding. We had a conference call today with the Ministry, which included senior staff. As well on the conference call was City of Port Colborne and Wainfleet because they've had a lot of damage as well. They walked us through the next steps. We are summarizing all our costs and projecting future costs, so we will be making a submission within 120 days, as we must. There is another program that they did mention today for private homeowners. It's called the DRAO. The public can make application to this. The criteria doesn't allow for a lot of funding. It doesn't include outbuildings and those types of seawalls and so forth. But I think if anybody did have damages to their private property, they should look into this program. They may be able to get some funding for that as well. But we will be definitely making a submission. We're totaling our cost, and we will do that within 120 days. We will be coming back to council because there's a resolution required as well that must be attached to that application.
I'm wondering if we could put on the town's website the information relative to the funding possibility for the public.
Yes, that'd be a good idea.
And also, it would be helpful if we could maybe just have a status report on our website with respect to this, but also how we're doing in terms of infrastructure. The roads have been reopened, what areas may still be sensitive. I understand that Point Avenue Road south of Erie Road is still an issue that we have to deal with. So I'm wondering if that's possible.
Yes, I believe so. Mr. Cook?
Through you, Chair, to the Mayor, absolutely, we can do that. We'll make sure we get that posted, and we'll put on the information, what information we have as far as application for private homeowners making a submission as well.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further? Councillor Zanko?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just further to the mayor's questions, actually, with regard to Waverly Beach, through you to Mr. Walsh, if I could. I'm wondering what our plan is in the meantime. I mean, I know with regard to funding submissions, we're looking at close to 4 months away. So what's our plan in the meantime to deter people from walking through the area? I know over the weekend there was many people continuing to walk that path. If you have any plans or if any discussions have taken place, I know there is some temporary fencing, but from my understanding, that's either being removed or it's being blown over by the wind.
Mr. Walsh?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we are bringing in more substantial temporary fencing, steel construction fence. It's called Moduloc, the trade name. That will be in place until we can effect positive repairs, whether they're temporary or permanent in nature, to that section of the trail.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything further? And Councillor Dubanow and then Councillor Butler.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just over the last little bit, I've been mulling over the region's waste management plan that they're going to be coming up with for the next contract. And, thinking it through and thinking the way things happened, going back however many months ago it was when we had the presentation and that report, I remember there was a lot of discussion about bi-weekly collection. I know that we had moved an amendment to the report that didn't explicitly endorse 2-week collection, but that we wanted it included in the RFP for at least consideration so that there was a level of transparency for costs for taxpayers to see. And I was very dismayed that the region in their report just went and said that Fort Erie endorsed it anyway, which was just not true. We had a discussion here, and I think it was pretty clear, at least in my opinion from what I heard, that there was some concern about that. I have a lot of concerns about what the region is proposing, particularly with their mantra about waste diversion. We're going to 2 weeks for waste diversion, and I could believe that if they were actually reducing the number of bags that they were taking, if they were cutting it in half, that would essentially force you to have no choice but to divert. Had they gone with clear bags, which were unpopular, but again, if the intent is to divert, that would have been a much better, at least in my opinion, way of getting to divert garbage. I'm deeply concerned that the reasons they're doing this is that they're feeding us platitudes about diversion, but this ultimately comes down to cost, and it comes down to a race to the bottom and a means to reduce the level of services that taxpayers in Fort Erie are receiving. And all the while, we're running into situations here, particularly with our seasonal resident community, the potential for garbage to be sitting on the road for a week if it gets left there, vermin and all sorts of stuff like that. There was no, at least from what I understand, any, ways to reduce the number of pickups by combining garbage together, moving it to other side of the streets. If you're concerned about greenhouse gas emissions, and we all should be because of climate change, we have a good example of what just climate change can do this past week. You would think that having the truck drive less often by combining pickups might be a good way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions because they accelerate, and that's when you see the smog come out of the back of the truck, and they didn't do that. So I'm deeply concerned about what the region's feeding us. I remember Councillor Lubberts had mentioned during that presentation, we need to send a message to the region. I think that's important. I was thinking about requesting a report, but I'll be giving notice of motion of this when we get to council. I wanted it to be spoken tonight that I don't think the region is doing it right, and we'll go from there. So thank you very much, Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Dubanow, and I'm sure that we will send our displeasure to the region, Mayor Redekop.
Yeah, just to comment on a few of the points that were raised by Councillor Dubanow. I did advise members of council, regional council, when we dealt with this, that the town of Fort Erie had not approved every other week, but we wanted it included in the tender. The reality is that the cost of waste management is going to be significantly higher in the future than it is now. It's like 70% higher. And so in order to deal with this issue, among other things, the region is going to be having two separate contractors deal with delivery, so that if one of them falls off the rails, at least there's another one that may be able to step in and pick up the slack. The real problem is that right now the region is static at about 56 to 57% diversion rate. It was 40% around 2010, went to 52% in 2011. That was when the number of bags was reduced from whatever it was to 2 or 1. That was the last time that there'd been a significant impact on waste diversion. The reality is that 50% of all of the garbage that's taken to the landfill site is compostable. That means that those organics could be put into the compost, they could be diverted. So that the region's target is 65%. They're at 56, 57. Even 65% is probably a modest goal. The only way that people are going to stop putting their compostables or their organics into the waste stream is to stop picking up the garbage every week. So that if it's picked up every other week, this will be an encouragement for people to start using their green bins, hopefully. So it's not as if there wasn't a lot of thought and concern and consideration put into this. There has been. Certainly we can say that, as the city of Niagara Falls has said, that the residents are being ripped off. They're not getting daily or weekly garbage pickup. That's fair enough. And it does look like a reduction in service in terms of pickup. But if the objective is to keep the cost of waste management services down, we're going to have to do something less than we're doing right now. If we want to reduce the amount of compostables that go into the waste management, we've got to do something now. And so many people are with the program, and they do compost, they recycle, they put out nominal amounts of waste to go to the landfill. There are still lots of people that apparently aren't, because as I said, 50% of all of what goes to the dump is something that could be diverted. So how this will work out, I'm not sure, but it seems to me that if we're serious about trying to limit the cost of waste management, divert more from our waste stream, not have to open new landfill sites, then we need to do something along these lines. And so that was essentially the discussion and the debate. The every other week, that was the recommendation from regional staff in order to try to deal with these issues. That passed by a vote of 19-8. I know that the councillors and the mayor from Niagara Falls were opposed. There were a couple of St. Catharines councillors that were opposed. But by and large, that seems to be the direction, so that in the long term, it's cost avoidance and it's environmentally sensitive. And I agree with Councillor Dubanow on the point about the pickups. The number of trucks that will be going through the communities will still be the same. That's, I think, problematic. But I don't think we should be blind to the fact that although the number of bags that people will be allowed to put out every week will not change, even though their garbage will be picked up every other week, I can't for the life of me believe that if people start to compost, put stuff in their green bins, the amount of garbage that will need to be picked up will be significantly reduced, and there will be at some point a reduction in the number of bags. I mean, my household, as an example, we could have monthly garbage pickup. There's nothing in the garbage that smells because we're composting everything or recycling everything. So unfortunately, that's a direction that I think we're going, and that just addresses some of the comments that you've made, Councillor Dubanow, but it's not as if this isn't a challenging issue because, as I said, the cost increase is going to be about 70%.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Any other comment? Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Councillor Lubberts. I'll just dwell on this for a minute here. I think I would be like the mayor, once a month, one green bag a month would be fine for me. But I'm always curious when I drive by on garbage day. I'm not the garbage police by any means, but sometimes it's pretty obvious. Somebody has a green bag out there. We're talking 7 o'clock in the morning. The trucks haven't gone by and they have no compost boxes or the green bin or the gray. And I was wondering, could there not be some thought be given to perhaps educating those individuals? Because it's pretty obvious that some people don't think it's important enough, but that's all I'll say on that one. My questions are for number one is that I understand from someone in Stevensville who owns a business that he is now being told about a significant road closure when they work on Stevensville Road. And I understand the road is due for reconstruction. I don't know what the timeline is for that, and I know it's coming, but I didn't know if it was next year or the year after. But anyway, I'm hoping that we're given notice of that also for the length of time, because I understand it could be like months that the road could be closed. And my concern is that if that's the situation, the most likely detour will be down East Avenue, which is past the public school. And I know I talked about in the traffic coordinating meeting this week is that, there's already some concerns. So if Stevensville Road is closed, let's say from Bowen to West Main or East Main, the likely road people are going to take is East Avenue right past the school. So if that is going to happen, I would like for us to put some precautions in. I know we loosely talked about a crossing guard, but if because there's a major change in the traffic, I think we have to seriously consider that. The other thing I would like to make sure that the residents know, I know that the store owner now knows, but I didn't get any, my husband talked to him, I didn't, so I don't have a lot of detail. But even today, there was something happening on Stevensville Road, and I don't know whether it had anything to do with the road closure or the region. I couldn't see all the names and all the trucks. But there was almost a major accident there, and it was just, I won't use the word stupidity, but lack of thought, given that the truck was on one side of the intersection. There was a person with a, stop and go sign on the other side of the truck, outside the lights. She let somebody go through. We have the green light. We don't know what she's doing because she's on the other side of the truck. A car is given the green light to go, not the green light, but the go ahead. We have the green light. Anyway, it was scary. And luckily I wasn't the first car at the intersection. I don't know how the car in front of me missed it because everyone was given the green light to go ahead. So I'm hoping that improves. And again, I don't know who was doing it, but it was really poorly done. There should have been 2 flag people, not 1. Anyway, and then my next question is about culverts. A lot of people in my ward have some culverts. There's some open ditches, and then there might be 3 pieces of property that have culverts. The grass goes right to the road, and then there's 1 or 2 lots that have open ditches, and then there's another culvert, and then there's another open ditch. And what's happening is that the culverts aren't clear. So what's happening is the water is standing now in the open ditches. It has no place to go. It can't go into the culvert because the culvert's blocked somewhere, or it's either higher or lower than where the water is. And the issue is that a lot of the individuals use these ditches to get rid of their stormwater, like from the eaves troughs and their sump pumps goes into the ditch. So they're concerned that if the water level is high, which it has been, when their pump is working or whatever, there's no place for the water to go because the ditch is already full with water because the culverts aren't clear. So I don't know whose responsibility is it. Is it the homeowner who has the culvert or the closed ditch? I don't know. So that's it. Thank you.
Mr. Walsh, can you comment on the, on any of this?
Yes, with respect to the closed culverts, those are ditch infills. We have a policy that does not allow any new ones, and when we come across them and drainage is substandard, the policy states that we can remove them. It's at our cost. It's our infrastructure. So if the councillor wants to drop me an email or a phone call tomorrow with a list of locations, we can take a look into it, see what the issues are.
And then, do you know anything about the road closures or the construction that's going on down there?
No, I don't, councillor. Again, I'm aware of the bridge replacement north of Main Street. That's not for a year or so, and my understanding is that traffic will be maintained at least as a one-way through there. Work between Bowen and Main Street, I'm not aware of anything that the region is doing.
Councillor Noyes?
Well, I think, like, again, I didn't think it was going, I know that reconstruction is going to happen, but I didn't think it was going to happen until 2021 or 2022. That's why I'm surprised that the store owner has been told to prepare.
So, Mr. Walsh, your thoughts are that the road, even though it's under construction, there'll be one-way traffic?
We can make a phone call tomorrow to the region and find out what's going on there.
Okay, all right, thank you. Councillor Butler?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Councillor Noyes there. I have residents that are having problems as well with closed culverts. But I really wanted to go back to what Mr. Cookett was saying, our CAO, with respect to the DRAO. I have received some phone calls from residents on Shirley Road who had a heck of a time because they're in the hazard zone. And I just want to know if that would be something that these residents could tap into. Do they get disqualified if they're in the hazard zone?
Mr. Cookett?
Through you, Chair, to the councillor, I don't believe so. I would suggest that they make the application and then see what comes back. I don't see why they would not receive funding because they were in the hazard zone. They did receive damages, and I think if they met all the criteria, they would get something. So I would suggest that they make application.
Thank you. And further to that, I'm going to send an email to Mr. Walsh with respect to this particular resident. And maybe there's something that we can look at as well to help those other residents on the street that received quite a bit of damage to their homes, well over $60,000 of the storm on Thursday night. And then there was just one thing that I wanted to say to you, was that I wanted to give my compliments to your team, because on Thursday afternoon, before the storm actually hit hard, there was some flooding on Thunder Bay Road, and your team was out there at the residents' locations, helping them out and digging through the culverts and making sure that the water was flowing again. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Any other comments? Councillor McDermott?
Thank you, Councillor Lubberts. I want to just briefly make a comment too with regards to the regional decision on garbage. I had a lot of phone calls and a lot of social media on the idea that goes along the lines of we've had a carrier who has been the most reliable over the past number of years. So now what we're going to do is we're going to reduce the number of trips. The part that fascinates me the most is what the mayor has just said, that there's going to be a 70% increase. How can we be paying a 70% increase for less service? That's what I'm interested in.
answer?
Yes.
Mayor Redekop?
Well, the answer is that when the original contract with the current contract was entered into years ago, it was a low charge, but that was 2011. That contract was extended. Now we're into a situation where there are probably 4 major contractors that deal with this issue, which means that there's limited competition, and they're charging for the service that they're providing. Nobody can think that over the last 2 years, Niagara's been well served by the contractor that was providing waste management services, because we weren't. Fort Erie was fortunate. Many of our areas didn't suffer loss of service, but there were areas in St. Catharines, Niagara Falls, almost every other municipality where on a daily basis, we would be given notification that this part of the city didn't get reached. And that's happened in Fort Erie. There have been probably over the past 6 months, I would say that once a week, sometimes twice a week, I would get a notification that there was a part of Fort Erie that didn't get serviced. So then they'd have to pick it up the next day. There were 4 main companies that submitted bids with respect to this contract for Niagara. And all of them are large, and all of them are competing with each other. And the charges that we're going to be paying are reflective of what everybody else in Ontario is paying. That's just the cost of maintaining a waste management service. So yes, it is. In terms of waste management, the pickup of your garbage, that would be every other week. Your compostables and your recycling, they're going to be picked up every week. So that theoretically, if you're concerned about the odor or attracting vermin with respect to your compostables, they're going to be picked up every week. Don't put them in your garbage, because your garbage is only going to be picked up every other week. So when we look at the cost of the actual service, when we look at the ability to divert from landfills and not have to open up new landfill sites, which is very, very expensive, when we look at the environmental impacts, those are guiding factors. But it's a competitive market, and unfortunately, the cost of waste management is expensive, and it is a problem. And all of the documentation is available to the public. It's on the region's website, these reports and what have you. And if anybody would like information, either I or Councillor Insinna, I'm sure would be happy to provide them with whatever we can. But that's the reality, and it's not a happy reality. I would think that at some point down the road, what will happen in Niagara is what happens in many areas, and that is, if people want to put out extra garbage, they can. They just have to pay for it. They can buy tags, they can do whatever they want, and in many places, they already do that. If you want to put out more. That's right, so we're going to reduce that, and if you insist on not composting or whatever, there probably will be more aggressive, and it may be that at some point there will be open bags. And I did want to also say that Councillor Noyes twigged me. When we had the debate at the region, I did speak about the issue of public education. That's something that's very important, and we should be putting money into public education so that people are not only warned about the fact that there are costs, but are encouraged to participate in the program. So that's a long answer to, I know, a short question, Councillor McDermott, but it's not a pretty sight.
Councillor McDermott, any further? No. Councillor Dubanow, and then Councillor Zanko.
No, just briefly, because I don't want to beat a dead horse, and I appreciate where the mayor's coming from with the diversion aspect, and I know this isn't really our issue, but the constituents come to us and they make it our issue, so we have to address this. Ultimately, the way I see it is this: you got the same number of bags, the same number of trucks to pick up that garbage, you're gonna have the same costs and the same garbage going into a landfill unless we get more aggressive if diversion is our goal. And I completely agree with the goal that diversion is necessary. The way I see this right now is that we aren't doing this primarily for diversion, we're doing it primarily for cost. And when you do something primarily for cost, and when you're dealing with going out to tender and out to contracts and involving the private sector, and you push those costs down, the private sector has to absorb those costs, and it results in a level of reduced service. And we've seen exactly what happens when you do that with the waste contract that we had with our current provider. It has just not turned out to be very good. If the region was serious about diversion, and I hope they are, they would have been much more aggressive in reducing the number of bags. As unpopular as it was, clear bags. You know, offer a tag for people who want to use an opaque bag, but get clear bags. I'm deeply concerned that we're being fed a line about diversion when this is primarily a reason of cost and primarily a reason of finding a way to reduce those costs, which reduces those services. I'm particularly frustrated right now hearing what the mayor has to say about only 4 companies. This council requested that the region look at the public sector doing this and getting a cost. And that never happened. We're just going out to tender. I'm struggling with this, and perhaps this isn't the venue because I'm not at regional council, but when my constituents come to me about this, it becomes my issue, and I have to speak about it. And this whole situation is just, it's very frustrating because we're a community with seasonal residents. As much as some people can put one bag out there, how are you going to police the compliance if you have a bag of trash sitting out there for 3 weeks attracting flies and bugs and rodents? And I just think the region could have done so much more and been such a leader on this issue on diversion and innovation, and they dropped the ball. And I'm just very frustrated by that. And it just needs to be said, and I will be bringing notice of motion about this because diversion is important. This doesn't get to the crux of that issue. I'm just going to leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zanko.
Thank you. I just actually had a question further to what Councillor Butler had mentioned about some of our residents having damage and not sure if they would qualify for funding because they live in a hazard area. What is that? It's the first I've ever heard of that terminology, so I was just wondering if someone could explain that to me.
Hazard area. Kelly, Mr. Walsh, could you comment on that? Or
I'll try my best. Hazard area is a floodplain or an area within a certain distance of a water body that's susceptible to hazards from the waterway. How's that, Kara?
That was very good.
is that good, Ms. Woodall?
Does that answer your question?
It does to some degree. I would suspect that we have many areas of hazard then. If,
Our, if I may, Mr. Chair, within our town GIS system, if you have a specific question on a property, give us a call. We can look it up as
Okay.
to whether it's in,
Good to know.
mapped out.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ms. Walsh, did you want to comment on that?
There are a number of hazard areas along the lakefront, as long as along creek edges. The hazard areas usually are about a 30-meter buffer area from the actual feature itself, and sometimes they can go up further than that. Along creeks, it's usually about a 15-meter buffer area.
One quick question further to that. So would residents know that they live in a hazard area based on zoning?
Through you to the counselor, yes.
Okay.
Their zoning would reflect if they were in the 1 in a 100-year hazard flood areas.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's probably subject to change. Once we get into just 1 week garbage collection, sounds like the whole town will be a hazard zone. All right. And Councillor Butler?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up, though, my resident on Shirley Road did not know that they were in a hazard zone, so I don't know that everybody knows about it, but they're starting to find out.
Yeah, Ms. Dolce, is that like on your property or is that on our mapping of the town? Hazard zones? It wouldn't be on your deed or anything, right, or on title?
No, it's not necessarily in your deed or title, but it is listed, you know, in your property tax information. It does tell you what your zone is on that
Oh,
information.
in your tax bill?
Yep. As well as we do have mapping available at the town. Should anybody want to inquire on whether they're in a hazard zone, we can definitely help them with that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Yeah, I'd like to just make a couple comments. First of all, Councillor Dubanow mentioned earlier, and this is to our CAO, mentioned earlier in the report from the region that basically Fort Erie was in favor of one every other week pickup. And I'm a little concerned about that myself, and I'm just wondering if we can get a report from all the other municipalities. I'd like to know how they felt personally. I don't want to hear it from the region. I want to hear it from them. That's number one. And number two, this increase in cost of up to 70%, to me, it sounds like a little fear-mongering, because if I remember correctly, and those of you that were on council last term, when Mr. Schuler was here, Councillor Schuler, he brought up the point of the fact that this contract was very low. And if I remember correctly, this contractor left about $3 million on the table. I could be corrected if I'm wrong, but I think it was somewhere around there. He left a lot of money on the table. So now, is the region telling us that it's a 70% increase from what we have now? Or is it going to be more in line, or just a little bit more than what we should have been paying based on the last contract that we had? Because this is scaring people when you're saying 70% increase, but I understand that it should be more than what this contractor charged, because this contractor I don't think he can afford to operate at what he bid. He left too much money on the table. So I'd like to get some more information on not the increase of what it is today, what we're paying this contractor, but what's the increase going to be on what would be normal for us to pay? Are we going to go back up to normal, or are we going to go to normal plus 30%? That's what I'd like to know.
So I'll circulate or maybe Mr. Walsh, I think I sent you a copy of the region's report with respect to this, as well as the presentation. If not, I'll make sure that all members of council have what the regional council was provided in terms of a report that deals with these issues and also indicates which municipalities supposedly supported every other week and which ones didn't. And there was also a presentation, and it will outline information. If there's further questions beyond that, then that'd be fine. But I think much of the information that you're looking for will be contained in those two documents.
Okay, thank you. Any other new business or inquiries? Being none, that brings us to the business status report. Any comments or questions? Being none, infrastructure services now in recess. I'll turn the chair back over to Mayor Redekop.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lubberts. And that takes us to corporate and community services. Councillor Dubanow.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So Corporate and Community Services is now in session. We have no presentations or delegations this evening. We do have reports. First on the agenda, CIO-30-1 2019 Supplementary Report, Whistleblower Policy. Can I get a mover for that? Councillor Butler. Any comments or questions? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to commend Ms. Morden for the work on this. It's really good, and I like the fact that there's a form that someone can fill out to submit anonymously or not anonymously. So great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Do we have any other questions? Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just, when I'm reading through this whole report, I was a little bit confused as to how the process is going to happen. And the reason for that was there was one point in here where it talked about the employee or the person, the whistleblower, has to get a form to fill out. I get that he's got to put his name on there, or she has to put their name on it. But it says that they would go to their superior, and if their superior wasn't available, they would go to the one above their superior. If they were going to make the complaint against their superior, then obviously they would go above. But the problem that I have with that, my thoughts on all this whistleblower is that the object is to protect the name of the whistleblower and keep that confidential. I would think that I would prefer that if there's a whistleblower, that the application be obtained by the CAO. And that the CAO and it sounds to me like it would be our manager of employment services, that would be HR. They would determine if the whistleblower complaint or allegation is legitimate. But even doing that, the HR person doesn't need to see the name. All they need to see is the allegation or the wrongdoing. And then the CAO and himself or herself can determine whether it's worthy of further investigation. That would protect the whistleblower to the point where there's only one person that knows who it is, and that would be our CAO. But when we start saying, well, you got to give it to your superior, it goes up the ladder. You could be 6 people would know who this person is before it even gets investigated. And I'm not comfortable with that. And I don't know, I can't place exactly in here where that needs to change, but I think somewhere we need to make sure that the whistleblower is only handing in his complaint to our CAO.
Thank you, Councillor Lubberts. I'm just wondering if Ms. Morden would perhaps like to step up and comment on the process and just how that works, if we can get some clarification on that.
Original report. We did take another look at this from the last council meeting, and the manager and supervisor have been removed. So the complaint now is either given to the CAO or to the manager of employment services. The reason that there is both individuals in there, council had brought it up at the last meeting that they'd like to see 2 individuals listed in the policy as opposed to 1 in case 1, it was a complaint against the CAO, or 2, if, I'm trying to say this delicately.
I think I know where you're going with that.
If maybe there wasn't trust in the CAO. So they wanted to see another individual listed. So we did remove manager and supervisor. If an employee has a complaint and they would like to come forward, there would only be 2 individuals that they would actually provide that complaint to, either the manager of employment services or the chief administrative officer. The complaint form has been added to the policy as well. If they don't put their name on it, they don't put their name on it. But we developed the complaint form after recommendations by Councillor Butler, that if they are coming to us anonymously, at least we're gathering enough information to be able to do a full and complete investigation.
Thank you, Ms. Morden. Does that answer some of those questions, Councillor Lubberts?
Yeah, that's good. Now, the only other thing was, where would the whistleblower get the form? Now, was it, because that's another problem. You go somewhere to get the form, then they're saying, oh, you're going to blow me in. So that needs to be, he needs to, or she needs to be protected, so that that form should just be available without saying, well, can I have a whistleblower form? How are they going to get the form?
Yeah, absolutely. Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Lubberts. Many of our policies are online, and this would be no different. So when the policy is put onto the public directory for our staff, the form would come along with it. No one would know that they're going on to get it. So they can go on, they can download the policy, and they can print out the form itself.
Okay, now, they're on page 4 of 9. one, two, like the third paragraph, the qualifying disclosure. It said qualifying disclosure is a disclosure of information which is in the reasonable belief of the worker to be made in the public interest and tends to show that one or more of the 6 specified types of serious wrongdoing include a failure to comply with legal obligation. Now, sometimes the wrongdoing is not illegal. So what happens here? Now there's no legal obligation.
Ms. Morgan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Lubberts, I'm actually going to ask if no.
Mr. Lustig, you don't want to touch that?
Let me.
See what I'm talking about?
I absolutely see what you're referring to, yes. It's page 4 of 9.
Page 4 of 9. On your thing, it's 8 of 16 on your tab. It said qualifying disclosure. It said it has to tend to show that one or more of the specific types of wrongdoing include a failure to comply with legal obligation.
I will get back to you on that one.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right.
Let me go back to my notes. I didn't bring them all here as.
I think that was it for me. But my main goal is to make sure that who's ever doing this is fully protected and
No, I can
Sure, that's all
definitely
I'm looking
appreciate that.
for,
No,
but-
thank you, Councillor Lubberts. And thank you, Ms. Morgan, for the information. Now, this first one is the supplementary report, which I believe we're receiving for information purposes. So do you, perhaps, does anyone have any other questions or comments about the supplementary report? Your Worship.
Yeah, I just had dealing with the potential for a complaint about the CAO. The paragraph 6.2 and paragraph 8.1 talk about the chief administrative officer being the person who would basically process these complaints. So I know that there's a second individual, the manager of employment services or whatever, yes, who's supposed to be involved. And I'm just wondering whether there shouldn't be a reference to that in both of those paragraphs. Sorry I didn't bring this up earlier. It's just I didn't have a chance to raise that with you. So I was wondering about that.
Yeah, Ms. Morgan?
To you, Mayor Redekop. Sorry, did you say 6.2?
6.2. So it indicates what the CAO is supposed to do. But if the complaint is about the CAO, presumably it would be the manager of employment services that would be the person doing the investigation.
So if it is a complaint of the CAO, there is a council section in here under responsibilities. It's section 6.1. So council would review allegations of serious wrongdoing made against the CAO and any applicable investigation reports, and take disciplinary action against the CAO if the CAO is found to have committed acts of serious wrongdoing. And for clarification, the same provisions identified in this policy would be followed in investigating an allegation against the CAO and the duty. It would come
understand.
directly to council.
Well, who's going to do the investigation?
An investigation, whether it would be the CAO or a employee, it would more than likely be done by a third party. And that's identified under the investigation section.
Paragraph 8.
In 8. But I can definitely take a look at that and make sure that that's clear.
Yeah, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to further the mayor's point, I think what he's looking at is just a line item that would be added there to say that if the CAO wasn't going to be the person that would be looking at it, then the manager of employment services would be. So it's just a simple addition to that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Any other comments? Councillor Lubberts?
Yeah, thank you. I'm not very sure I understand what Councillor Butler was referring to because the CAO, if there's a problem with the CAO, which, I mean, I don't think we would with our CAO, but a new one maybe, or a past one. A past one, probably. But anyway, I would think that would come to council because
Yes, do the
But-
investigation.
the manager of employment services
Yes.
would receive it, but bring it to council.
Yes.
And then council and the manager of employment services would determine whether it's legitimate.
For you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Lubberts, then council would be involved in the process of determining whether or not a serious wrongdoing has occurred and what the process will be in any
Yeah,
sort
we
of
would
investigation.
determine that, right? And
Yeah.
then from
Correct.
there,
Yeah.
if we determine yes, then
Yes.
it goes to a third party.
Correct. You would take over the role of the CAO for the CAO.
All right. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Lubberts. Any other questions, comments? Okay, so I'll call the question now on the first report for information purposes. All those in favor? All right, that carries. So that moves us on now to CAO-30-2019, which I believe was previously moved by Councillor Zanko, which is now on the floor again. Now, the direction that I received from the clerk, she was very helpful for me and still thinking about us even as she's on holiday, was that if we wanted to move the amended changes, we would have to, someone would have to move an amendment to remove as recommended in report CAO-30-2019 and insert in the form of Appendix 1 attached to report CAO-1 or CAO-30-1-2019. If we wanted to move with the amended report. So this report's on the floor. Are there any questions? I'd be happy to. Councillor Lubberts, do you want me to? Did you want to move the amendment? Okay. So Councillor Zanko moves the amendment. So the amendment is on the floor. Any questions? All right. So I see Councillor Lubberts and I see Councillor Butler. Councillor Lubberts? That's very kind of you and very generous. So in that case, I will go to Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Councillor Lubberts, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering if, since there were some questions with respect to the report, we just postpone this to the next council and committee?
Are you moving that it be postponed?
Yes.
Okay. So we have someone's moved to postpone. So
The next committee meeting, which is next Monday, Tuesday.
that sounds good. So that would be, I believe that's November 12th. Right. So are there any other discussions about timing? Okay, so that's on the floor. I'll call the question. All those in favor? All right, so the postponement carries. All right, so moving right along. So we have no other reports, so that moves us to, we have no response to inquiries.
Should be inquiries or new business.
Yeah, that seemed a little odd. So in that case, yeah, are there any inquiries or new business? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councillor Dubanow. And I may have missed it because we had a long discussion several months ago. Are we going to get an update on the short-term rentals? in regards to how it went. I would think the season is now over, we're into November. When can we expect a report in regards to if there's been any problems or concerns or how it went? And also, have there been any applications? I think in our in our bylaw it basically says that we're looking for them to start the applications for next year by January 1st, or I'm just wondering if there's been any interest or any movement.
Just for clarification, would that be under corporate or would that be under planning and? Not that it matters. I'll direct it to whatever staff member. It's just, yeah, Ms. Dolch.
Through you to the councillor, I'm not involved in the application process that's handled by the coordinator of business licensing, but I do know there has been some interest in the applications. We weren't accepting applications till recently. We were getting the program up and running and ready to go. We can't accept payment, is my understanding, until January because it's not in effect until then. But Mr. Stouffer's been working with a number of individuals, getting them prepared for next season.
Thank you, Ms. Dolch. Anything else, Councillor Noyes? Any other inquiries, questions? All right, so we'll move on to the business status report. Any questions or comments about the business status reports? All right, so in that case, looks like corporate and community services is closed for the evening, and I will hand the chair back to His Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Dubanow. That takes us to scheduling of meetings. Are there any meetings that anyone wishes to advise us of? Councillor Noyes?
Yes, it's a senior citizen meeting this Wednesday at 9 o'clock in the Lions Center.
Any others? Then I'm going to have to ask someone to move for adjournment. Councillor Dubanow, sorry. My head naturally went towards Councillor Dubanow. All those in favor? That is carried. So we can't go away quite yet because we have a special council meeting that we're dealing with. And so I'm going to call this special council meeting to order. Madam Clerk, the roll call, please.
Your Worship, all members of council are present this evening.
Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? There being none, Councillor Noyes, you have a resolution for third and final reading of the fire prevention and public education policy, which had previously gone through first and second reading.
Yes, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Dubanow that bylaw number 135-2019 is given third and final reading to be signed by the mayor and the clerk under the corporate seal.
Are there any questions or comments with respect to the report? Councillor Noyes?
Thank you. I did have an opportunity to talk with the fire chief about the open air burning. That was my concern, whether it affected campfires, and it doesn't. So that was my only concern. I think it's a good report. I think it does give the authority to the fire department to do what they need to do in public interest.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. That then takes us to Councillor Butler. You have first and second reading for the confirmatory bylaw.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott that bylaw number 146-2019 to confirm the actions of council at its council and committee meeting held on November 4th, 2019, and its special meeting held on November 4th, 2019 is given first and second reading.
All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. Which takes us to Councillor Zanko.
Yes, thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Dubanow, that bylaw number 146-2019 is given third and final reading to be signed by the mayor and the clerk under the corporate seal.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. And Councillor McDermott. You've poached Councillor Dubanow's usual responsibility.
How did I manage that? Thank you, Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Butler, that council adjourns at 7:14 p.m. to reconvene into regular meeting of council on November 18, 2019.
All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. Thank you all.